Hello everybody, my name is Aldemaro Romero Jr. I am going to talk about diversity in academia, problems and solutions, because diversity is becoming a more and more difficult issue to deal with in colleges and universities. The idea of this course is to present with you some information that I think will be important. And basically, the outline for this course will be to start talking about diversity in academia by the numbers. And you may be surprised by some of the numbers I'm going to present to you, some of the facts that are revealed through many researchers and many sources. The other topic that I'll be talking about will be stereotypes and false expectations, which is one of the major issues when it comes to understanding the problem of diversity in academia. The third topic will be best practices. Here I'm going to give you a particular list of things that can be done and have been tested to be successful in order to improve the issue of diversity in academia. And finally, conclusions with some messages for you to keep in mind every time that you deal with this issue. Let's start with some few numbers that are important when we compare the US general population with the higher ed minorities when it comes to how well represented are minorities in the general population. The US population, according to the US Census Bureau for 2019, was 60% white, 60.1%, and about 39.9% non-whites. How well minorities are represented in academia in the United States? At the level of assistant professors, only 22.9% are non-whites. Then 21.1% are associate professors. And then only full professors, 16.1%. That is a very low number when compared with the number of people who have the degrees in higher education, and especially with the general population in this country. When it comes to women, the situation is not better. In the US population, according to the US Census Bureau, 50.8% are females. And of all the people who are involved in academia, women represent 51.2% of doctoral degrees. So they are a majority. Yet look at the representation at different levels. Assistant professors is 50.4%, which is about the same that we have for the general population. And associate professor, it goes down to 43.6%. And when it comes to full professors, it's only 30.7%, which is pretty low and tells you something about the obstacles that women face when it comes to rankings in the professorship in this country. To make things even worse, women in academia, women professors, they earn about 10% less than their male counterparts make. So here you can see immediately a big disbalance, lack of balance between males and females when it comes to how they are compensated for doing exactly the same job. Now, what kind of gender stereotypes are we facing these days? Larry Summers, then Harvard University president in 2005, he was talking in a conference on diversifying the science and engineering workforce. And President Summers basically said, one hypothesis that could explain the higher proportion of males in science and engineering fields was the intrinsic aptitude difference in gender. Of course, this was immediately read as a way to say, well, men and women are different when it comes to the ability to do science and engineering. Needless to say, this brought a lot of bad publicity for him, despite the fact that, because Harvard the year before had only offered 4 of the 32 people at Harvard went to women. So immediately you can see that at the very beginning of the whole process, women are not well thought of in institutions as prestigious as Harvard are. And needless to say, this created a lot of controversy for him because they said, well, he's propagating some gender stereotypes. He defended himself saying, well, this was taken out of context. But he didn't give a very good impression, and the very fact of those numbers I mentioned earlier, that only 4 out of the 32 tenure offers in 2004 at Harvard went to women. So there is no question that there is an issue for many people with women in academia. So a few years later, there was a paper published in the prestigious journal Science regarding the expectation of brilliance and gender distributions across academic disciplines. And this was interesting because basically the population that was surveyed by these researchers were people who were already professors in academia, people who were doing postdocs, and people who were graduate students. So these are insiders. And they try to figure out what is the expectations that this population have regarding the ability of women to be brilliant when it comes to academia, particularly in certain disciplines. And this is what they found. You can see here in the top part of this graph that this is the percentage of US PhDs who are female. You can see that in 3 areas essentially, there are more women than males, which has molecular biology, evolutionary biology, and neurosciences. And then underneath here is the way this kind of a specific ability is believed to have in this higher education population. And most people in academia think that women are not good at math. And there you have it here in this graph that they produce. The other problem that the facing has to do with in terms of the social sciences and humanities. As you can see, in many areas, the majority of PhDs are in most of the fields, like you can see here, art history, psychology, education, communication studies, Spanish, etc. However, as you go to these other areas like classics, Middle East studies, economy, music composition, and in particular philosophy, the women don't fare very well in either the way they are represented and, what is worse, the way they are seen by their colleagues in the same discipline. The case of philosophy is interesting because this has been an area that is considered to be the most sexist of all the disciplines, in which women face tremendous pressure, in part because of the way philosophers behave themselves, in the way they discuss things with a lot of aggressivity many times, and many women feel intimidated by this, particularly when before they reach the level of tenure. The other set of results that they receive had to do with the percentage of US PhDs who are African Americans and Asian Americans. The top of this graph is for African Americans and the bottom is for Asian Americans. For African Americans, you can see that the percentage is extremely low. Even when it comes to education, it's very low for PhDs, women PhDs in these different areas. And again, philosophy shows here as a very bad example in terms of both representation and also in sense of how the expectations are regarding their brilliance. When it comes to Asian Americans, they basically are in a little bit better situation when it comes to areas like computer science, statistics, engineering, but in the other ones they are also very badly perceived by their colleagues. And again, philosophy shows to be an area, very problematic area for women in higher education. What were the conclusions of these researchers regarding all this data that they collected? Number one was that there is a statistically significant difference in success between genders based on the number of hours of work. In other words, a woman and a male can attain exactly the same success, basically based on the exact amount of energy and work time that you put into your profession. The second one is there is no evidence that men are more, quote, brilliant, unquote, than women in any field, which basically puts to rest this idea that there are women who are better in this or worse than males in that. And finally, the stereotypes make women and African Americans seem less suited for specific disciplines than their male and white counterparts. So again, we're dealing here with the stereotypes, we're dealing here with false assumptions about brilliance, and therefore we need to be aware of that before we start dealing with this problem in general. So let's see that you say, well, see, the situation is so bad for women in the purely academic ranks. What if I become a college administrator? Maybe I'll be considered better, maybe I have better possibilities of earning more money doing that. Well, think twice. 50% of all the department chairs and associate deans in US colleges and universities are women, which is fair. Then when you go to the level of deans, only 40% of them are females. And when you go to upper administration, 30% are females. That is at the level of provosts, vice chancellors, vice presidents, and presidents themselves. But the situation when it comes to compensation is even worse for women in college administration. In 2001, women administrators earned 77 cents per dollar versus their male counterparts. In other words, the women in administration were paid 23% less than their male counterparts by 2001. You may think, well, that's an old figure. Maybe things have improved. Look at this number. In 2017, the pay was 79 cents per dollar compared with males. So they were being paid less than 22% than the male counterparts. So again, after 16 years, the situation has not significantly changed about all this. So how about the representation of minorities at the presidential level? Minorities represented 17% among all the presidents at colleges and universities, which is still below the national average for the general population. They are a little bit better represented in public colleges, 22.3%, mostly because of the community colleges that are around that tend to have a little bit more females than the average, national average. For private non-profits like Ivy League and the like, they represent only 10.6% of all those presidents, which is pretty low. But here comes what really surprised me when I learned about these numbers. In minority-serving institutions, that institutions have at least 25% of students of a particular ethnic non-white group. In 2011, 38% of those presidents were minorities. 5 years later, 2016, it went down to 35.5%. So again, this gives you an idea of how the prospect for these individuals is when it comes to reaching the higher echelon of a college administration. So instead of going up, we are having fewer minorities in minority-serving institutions. That will be the logical place to find a large proportion of minorities as presidents. So the question is why? Why is this happening? Why even the trends are getting worse and worse? What is behind the roots of the problems that we are facing in academia when it comes to diversity? And that's going to be the next portion of the lecture, of this Diversity in Academia lecture. So stay tuned. Okay, now let's take a look at the roots of the problems. What is causing this tremendous imbalance when it comes to representation of minorities in academia and also of women in academia? The first thing that we need to remember here is basically the very fact that academia has always been racist and sexist. If you go back to the first colleges and universities in this country, all the way up to the end of the 18th century, these were places only for males, white males. That was the basic expectation for the population of these institutions. So no wonder that there are historical roots on these institutions for being racist and sexist. So this white male only mentality was very much at the very beginning of the history of these institutions, these colleges and universities, and will be maintained, and you will see that later on with some statistics, until the 1970s, believe it or not, in many institutions of higher education. It wasn't until 1890 when the Second Morrill Act created the first African American and Native American universities. So way at the end of the 19th century. And things also for women didn't go very well. It wasn't until 1913 when we have the first college for women, specifically for women, a private one, the Moravian Seminary. Of course, before that, there were some women and some minorities accepted in some public universities, but they were by far the big minority in all these cases. So how widespread the problem has been? As late as the 1930s, top colleges such as Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Cornell, and the University of Pennsylvania had quotas on the number of people they accepted that were not WASPs and were not males. Let me give you some examples of that. Yale had actually a written policy that said never to admit more than 5 Jews, take only 2 Italian Catholics, and take no blacks at all. I think it cannot be more explicit than that. And this is one of the top institutions of higher education in this country. And this is something that has been uncovered going through the archives of this institution in a number of publications. When it came to women, actually the motto was keep the damn women out, as you read it there. In Yale, at Yale until 1969, women were not admitted in Yale. The same year was when Princeton also started to admit women in the regular undergraduate courses. Cornell, although technically they accepted a few women since 1872, as a practical matter, this wasn't a widespread procedure to admit women until 1970. Brown, another top university, it wasn't until 1971 that they admitted women, and it was because they merged with a university, with the College of Pembroke, in order to admit women for the first time at the undergraduate level. Dartmouth, that didn't happen until 1972, and Harvard until 1977, when Harvard and Radcliffe merged. Again, we see these very prestigious institutions being very slow in admitting women in the ranks of students. And Columbia, 1981. Although Barnard students were allowed to attend certain Columbia courses as early as 1955, the fact of the matter is that Columbia didn't admit women until 1981. So here you see all these very prestigious institutions in the northeast of the United States having a problem with women. And this picture represents the first orientation for women at Yale in 1968. For them to be admitted the next year. It was great jubilation among women, and some of the male students, as you can see in their faces there, didn't seem to be totally convinced that was the right thing to do. So at the root of these problems is something called unconscious bias. The easier way to define this is to say, hey, many people think I am not a racist, I'm not a misogynist, etc., etc., etc. But at the end of the day, you do conduct business in a way that is racist and misogynist. Let me give you this example. From 1783, by the then president of Yale, Ezra Stiles, who interviewed a woman who wanted to go into Yale, a very bright woman. Actually, she was 14 years old when she was interviewed by the Yale president. And what the president wrote was, Were it not for her sex, she would be considered fit to be admitted as a student in the freshman class of Yale University. In other words, her problem was that she was a woman, not that she wasn't prepared to go to college. So the definition of social stereotypes is basically something that is formed about certain groups of people from outside conscious awareness. In other words, you may think that you are not a racist, but you behave and you have thoughts along racist lines. So what exactly does this mean? The first thing that you need to do in order to deal with unconscious bias is recognize that there is a problem, and there is a problem. Let me give you a few examples. The Association for Women in Science, for example, and the Mathematical Association of America have a specific guidance about how to recognize this problem in those areas that are among the ones that most people consider that issues with women. And I encourage you to go to the website and find some of the tools they provide for that. But probably the one that has been the most successful and more widely used is the Harvard Implicit Bias Test. It is a self-test. That means that only you taking the test will know the results of it. It takes between 10 and 15 minutes, and you can find the test in this website, or just simply Google Harvard Implicit Bias Test, and then you will see how you fare when doing that. When I implemented that in one of the institutions I have worked for, you couldn't believe the number of faculty who were in search committees coming to me and telling me, I had no idea that I had these biases toward minorities. I have no idea I have these biases toward females. And that's a reality that we have to face. As a personal experience, let me give you a very good example. When I became dean, one of the institutions I have worked for, I found that there was very little representation of women and minorities in the sciences. So I threw a challenge to the department chairs of those science departments and asked them, come up with a good candidate you think will be for your department who happens to be a minority, and I will talk to the provost in order to ensure that a line is open. So we are not taking away any line from you, we are adding a line, a faculty line, to your department. It sounds like a sweet deal, but you cannot imagine the tremendous resistance that was within the departments to do that. Specifically, there was one in which the chair identified an African American who was doing a very good job as a postdoc in another university. And when he presented that to the faculty, almost half of the faculty rejected him, not because he wasn't prepared, but because he was black. They never said that, but that was the bottom line. By the way, this person later performed very well, got tenure, and was considered one of the best teachers in the entire college. So how you deal with these unconscious bias issues? First of all, is have members of the search committee to take the unconscious bias test. In that way, they will become, in most cases, but not all cases, more aware about their own failings when it comes to identify issues with biases in their personal opinions. The other one is when you have to make a decision about this, give an undivided attention when evaluating a candidate. Psychologists will tell you that many bad decisions are made when you are tired, when you are distracted, or rush to make a decision. So take your time for that. And actually, the general recommendation from psychologists is to think about 15 to 30 minutes per applicant. After you get to the final list of the people you would like to bring to your institution, take your time. Read very carefully his or her CV. Go through the background of the individual, how well he or she performed in the interview process, what the letters of recommendations are saying, what the background checks may be saying, all that sort of things. Take your time, because you wouldn't believe the kind of mistake you can make just by a first impression, or just by looking very lightly over the specifics of the applicant in terms of his or her qualifications. Also, make sure that you know what you're looking for. This is a problem that sometimes happens when people say, oh, we have a line, let's look for something that does this and that, and then they stop there. They don't understand, for example, whether or not the person is a person who will do well with minority students, for example, a person who will bring enormous amounts of money in terms of research funding, or a person who will perform very well as a teacher in the classroom. So make sure that you know exactly what the kind of qualifications you're looking for when it comes to these candidates. Then make sure when you evaluate different candidates, the way they are evaluated are always the same. In other words, you are always asking for the same questions, given the same time, so you can really compare apples with apples, no apples with oranges, because otherwise there will be a form of bias that you are performing in this particular situation. The other thing is disregard academic pedigree. Many people say, oh, but this person graduated from Harvard or from Yale, and this other from a state university. Well, think about this. Most people don't have the same opportunities that all the rest, that the ones who landed their feet in these big name institutions, because of family situations, because of geography, because of many things. So look not only about the talent of the individual, but also about what this individual can provide later on when it comes to deliverables that you can provide in terms of the teaching, the research, the ability to provide service, to be a good member of the department, etc., etc. So don't look at those things just by the cover, as they say when it comes to books. Just look very closely into the background of the individuals to understand when he or she is coming from. And then avoid these brilliant expectations regarding women. There have been a number of studies that show that, for example, when a paper in many areas, not all, but many areas, is co-authored by a woman with a man or a woman with several males, even when the woman appears as the first author, there is this implication that the males were the ones who did the real work for this paper, not the woman. So avoid that at all costs, because it's so easy to fall into that kind of trap. So what else should we do? I already gave you some recommendations on specific things, but in the next session of this class, I'll be talking about step by step things, practical things you can do in order to improve the diversity in your institution. So stay tuned. Okay, now we come to the third part of this lecture, which is the practical one. Although we gave some initial tips about certain things that will work well, or generally work well, now I want to go to kind of a list of different things in different areas that you might want to look into in order to improve the diversity environment in your institution of higher education. The first thing is campus climate assessment. You need to know exactly where you stand as an institution to better take a look from both a qualitative and quantitative way. What kind of practices are currently on campus? What is the climate on campus? Do people feel sidelined because of their race or because of their gender? Are some kind of prejudice going on because some people didn't graduate from very top universities or not? So this is the kind of things you need to start asking about when dealing with these issues. The second one has to be with the understanding of what should be based on a broad definition of diversity. That includes gender, ethnicity, national origin, age, sexual orientation, disability, and religious background. Some people, for example, I have found that they say, well, that person does very well because he is Asian and things of that nature. No, you have to look at this in a much broader way, and we're going to talk about some of those details later on in this lecture. The other one is make sure that you use internal resources, administration, faculty, staff, and students to conduct these surveys, because different constituencies within your institution will see different things because where they are located in terms of the demographics of the institution. So make sure that this is a much ample study of the situation of your institution, and also a way for having everybody feel involved in this process, because this has to be something that the whole campus has to adopt as part of their own motto. The second step is to develop a comprehensive diversity plan. So you see, okay, now we have found that we have these problems, these perceptions, and these biases. What do we need to do in order to change whatever maladies may occur in our campus? So you need to come up with a diversity plan, what you want to do in order to improve things. So first you need to identify both problems and goals related to diversity and inclusion. In other words, you may say that we found this particular problem of lack of representation of women in certain areas, for example. So the goal has to be how we can increase that representation in a way that is substantive and really makes sense when it comes to improving the environment in your campus. Then institutionalize the plan. Again, make sure that all the constituencies in your campus recognize that diversity is a top priority. And you may think that, well, everybody thinks so. Well, not necessarily, and we'll talking about that in more detail later on with some examples. The third point within this second step is to include input from all constituencies, faculty, both tenure track and non-tenure track, people with tenure, without tenure yet, staff, students, and alumni. Alumni can become a very important resource because they can tell you something about the history of the place and things they saw before that haven't been changed much in the last years or even decades. Then get pressing head of the institution, whether it's a president, chancellor, that they should publicly show interest and support for the plan. And in these terms, it's not only to tell them, oh yeah, we believe that this is a goal we have to achieve. No, they need to show that they really care about this, that they provide resources for this, and that they are involved in the implementation, not only the planning part of it, but the implementation of that particular plan. And never forget this, the implementation will require financial resources. It costs money to hire new people. It costs money to come up with some workshops, lectures, and some of the other things we'll be talking about in a few minutes. So the open administration must provide general financial resources, because that's the best way actually for them to demonstrate they are serious about improving the climate on campus when it comes to diversity. Then comes the step of promoting diversity. Again, don't believe that because diversity is something that everybody talks about, that everybody is behind the idea. You need to make it a really top priority for your campus. So faculty and staff need to be informed about diversity issues and provide cultural competency training for them. Don't expect that because they think that diversity is important that they understand what the problems are. Show them numbers. Tell them about the issues, the problems that have surfaced through surveys or other methods to acquire information about what the situation on campus is and what actually other campuses are doing in that regard, and training how to deal with these issues. That's very important. And there are a number of individuals probably in the campus, but also outside the campus, who can be invited and talk to them about how to deal with these problems. Then make sure that people with diverse background are routinely portrayed and their achievement recognized in the marketing materials of the institution. It is important that to say this is what we are going to be finding in this campus when we visit the campus, whether you are a candidate for faculty, a student, a candidate for staff, etc., etc. But do not make the mistake to say, oh, let's only present pictures that show that we have a diverse campus, because that will show. There was a case not long ago in which a university was caught actually doing Photoshop of some of the crowds in order to show my black faces in the crowd. And that's not the case. I mean, be sincere, say we don't have too much diversity, and that's precisely we are working very hard to change that. I think that's a much better message than a doctored picture. Give also a Diversity Achievement Award annually, based on nominations from faculty, staff, and students. Then present the award at a campus on a wide occasion, like for example, the president being given by the president as a fall convocation, or recognition of X number of years of service, that sort of thing, because that is very important for everybody to understand that this is something that you care about and you celebrate diversity. And also the institution should take every opportunity to talk about its successes with diversity. Talk about the obstacles. Say about the things that have changed, how they're changing, how you can portray these individuals as an example of that you can attract more diverse faculty and staff to your institution, and make sure that they get the recognitions they deserve for doing that particular job. When it comes to the search process, get involved with the Equal Opportunity Office of your campus. I think it's very important for that office to visit with the faculty search committee to tell them about the do's and don'ts when it comes to the search process. For example, don't get involved in personal questions, family questions, things of that nature, because that's not allowed. That is counterproductive. Other questions need to be addressed that are the same for everybody. The process has to be identical for every individual, for every visit, and the like. So the Equal Opportunity Office in your campus can be very helpful in terms of giving you all the guidance that you need. Also, when you put out an ad announcing that you have a new position in there, make sure that that ad contains a very strong statement regarding diversity. If you take a look at most of the ads in academia, for example, looking at the clinical higher education when you're searching for faculty, almost all of them say we are an equal opportunity institution. Well, guess what? Everybody says that. So try to differentiate yourself by doing something stronger. For example, make ability to work with multicultural, diverse groups of people a requirement. That means that they are expected to be able to deal with issues of diversity because of their own background or because of their own inclination to do so in the long run. So I think that's an important statement that you need to make in those job ads that you publicize. Also develop anti-unconscious bias practices. And the example I gave you in the previous session about the use of the Harvard test for unconscious bias is very important, because that creates a better sense of what's going on, and also to become more aware when someone is rejected or not taken seriously, that may be because of a biased thing. And again, there are many training courses for that in order to achieve that particular goal. Also involve faculty in identifying terminal degree candidates representing diversity and invite them to apply. This is something I have used personally with great success in the past. For example, let's say that you have a new opening in philosophy, in a particular area of philosophy, or if actually your department of philosophy or psychology or whatever, they don't have anyone who emphasizes issues that have to do with minorities, with gender, and that sort of thing. What you need to do then is to talk to the department chair to transmit to the rest of the faculty the announcement that if they should work through the networks and conferences, through the electronic boards and that sort of things, telling individuals that there are opportunities in your department in these areas, and that you are actively seeking a minority or a woman in that particular area. Once you get that person identified and the faculty agrees with that, tell the dean to make the call inviting this person to actually apply. That has a tremendous effect because it shows that from the very beginning, the institution is really serious about you. The institution is really interested in increasing diversity on campus. And therefore, that's a tactic I have used again many times with a lot of success by doing that. Then, remember when candidates come to campus and they are going through the interview process, these people have families. And although you shouldn't be asking questions regarding their family situation, you should let them know that you will support to the maximum extent the reallocation of their families in that area, whether by helping them to find a job, schools, network of people who can help them, and make sure that they understand that will be there, because it's not just by the time that you get the contract that then you're going to forget about them. It's basically after they come, because it's going to take sometimes several years to acclimate to a totally different geographic environment. Also, make sure that the search committee has diversity within it. I know this sounds logical, but you need to also be aware of several complications. In campuses where the diversity is very low, or where the diverse faculty who are involved in these committees are just people who are in the first, second, or third year of their tenure track process, this can be a complicated thing for them. Because, for example, if there's a strong voice among the elder faculty, the more established ones, the more influential ones, against certain things in order to create more diverse campus, they may feel hampered to express their opinion and to be very clear about what their opinion is when it comes to those issues. So that is something you have to be very careful, and as an upper administrator or middle administrator, you need to make sure that the faculty understand that they shouldn't use their power not to intimidate this junior faculty, because they know they will going to need their votes in order to get tenure. And the other issue is the burden of minorities. When you have very few minorities, there is this tendency to increase, to make them spend more and more time in basically being in these committees. And that can be a problem because they are basically doing more service than the average faculty in the department. In the case of junior faculty, that means there's more distraction when it comes to their research and their teaching and other services. So that's why you have to be careful with that. And the other is participate in events of non-profit organizations that specialize in providing opportunities for minorities in academia. Let me give you the example of the Black Doctoral Network. This is a group of individuals who meet once a year, and in those meetings, basically you have representation from many institutions of higher education telling them we're looking for a physiologist, we are looking for a social scientist in this particular area, so on and so forth. So you have a personal approach to encourage them to come to campus, to at least apply for the position. And that gives you an advantage in that regard. But also in these meetings, many of these candidates give presentations of what they do. And I have been really, really amazed by the quality of these presentations of people who are basically finishing their PhD or in a postdoctoral position. And you can say, this person really will be doing great on my campus. So participate in this type of meetings, because I think will be very useful for you. Another tactic, and this one you have to use your diplomacy with the upper administration, is what is called cluster hiring. If your institution have a very low number of minorities or women in a particular area, you may have to convince the upper administration to provide the resources to hire more than one person at the same time, because it takes so long in colleges and universities to replace individuals that have been there for 30 years or 40 years. and because we cannot basically terminate their tenure just because of age, according to the law. Basically, you can say we can make big progress if we can hire several people of color or several women in a particular field in order to increase the situation in that regard. So try to you can hire more than one diverse person at a time. And actually, this presents a good opportunity when it comes to faculty of color. Why is that? Because if they are married to other faculty of color who probably met during graduate school and they are married, this also gives you a tremendous opportunity to offer them a very strong message that we care about the two of you, and that will establish a more stable relation between those individuals at the institution in particular. Also, try to hire people at all levels with interdisciplinary leanings. Why I'm saying this? I'm not talking about this just as a subject that people are more interdisciplinary today. You need to get someone who has more interdisciplinary for this or for that. The reason why I'm saying this is people who are in interdisciplinary fields tend to be more gregarious, tend to collaborate with other faculty in many different projects, and that creates a better welcoming environment for them. And besides that, you can actually say, listen, you can be also more productive because you are doing more teamwork with other faculty. So this is another thing that you should keep in mind when doing these hirings. And then have visiting and or exchange programs that will provide a presence of diversity among the faculty on campus. Contact institutions with higher numbers of Latino or Native Americans faculty. When you have little representation of people of color in your faculty, in order to deal with the issue of unconscious bias, bring these staff from other places. Give them a one semester position where they can come and demonstrate what a person of color can do in their particular disciplines. And this will be a very important thing for you to deal also with the issue of unconscious bias. Then you have the issue of developing a multicultural resource directory for candidates and new diverse faculty hires. Don't expect because you hire someone and you give this person a computer and a desk and an office and things like that, that the whole thing ends there. No way. You need to make sure that when they come to campus, which probably will be the first time they are in that particular town or in that particular campus, tell them there are all these resources for you in terms of other organizations, networking opportunities, what other people are like you who are in these institutions that you can work with them in this particular issue. So that, I think that's a very important aspect that you need to take into consideration. And for that, it is important for minority candidates to understand that there are appropriate resources available to them both on campus and in the community. So think not only on campus, but also in the community at large, where they can connect with other people or other organizations to get the support that they need. And you need to have a guide of those resources that have to be constantly updated and available on the website of the institution, so you don't have to tell them, I'm going to make you a photocopy or send you a paper. No, put it on the website with all the links and all the information they may need in order for them to know that this is something that is their right to have access to, not a favor that you are doing for them. Funding initiative, and now we are talking about money. Office competitive beginning salary and startup incentive. Remember that you will be in competition probably with other institutions that are making also offers. But in addition to providing this welcoming environment for those faculty in your institution, it's important that they also know that they are going to be well supported financially, because that also have a tremendous impact in their success when attaining tenure on your campus. Talk with the administration about bridge funding to hire a diverse candidate in anticipation of a retirement. This is something I have done a few times and we're very successful. When a faculty member starts talking about, I'm going to be retiring in a year or 2 years or this or that sort of things, talk to the upper administration to say, listen, we have identified this faculty of color or this woman in this particular field that likes gender diversity, who will be a great person for this department, only that we will have to pay kind of 2 salaries instead of 1 for 1 or 2 years. But this is an opportunity you have to take advantage of, and let the upper administration know that these opportunities are there and they should take advantage of that. Then funding for diverse faculty research projects. What this means is tell the new faculty that if their research has to do with issues of diversities, like for example, no matter what the discipline is, teaching people of colors on this, or teaching women on the importance of engineering, for example, where there's a little representation of them, or even males in the case of nursing, where the males are really a minority, they tell them that there will be funding for this type of research projects, because in that way they will get more connected with the realities of campus and improve the environment for diversity on those campuses. Also fund faculty to develop a new course, revising an existing course offering that will feature diversity and on comparative material and perspective. I did this in the past and worked very well. Basically what I did was telling faculty, we are opening this opportunity for a group of faculty who will be working in this particular area in which we need new courses, we need something different in the area of minority, and then tell them that you're going to give them, let's say, $200 stipend for research development, things, money they can use to go to a conference or to subscribe to a journal or becoming a member of a particular association, academic association. So in this way, you put them together in a room and say, okay, we have given these resources to come up with a solution to this problem. We're developing new courses in these areas that are important when it comes to diversity. And believe me, I was so pleased when I saw the tremendous interest that in my institution was created through this particular initiative. And also, internal grants program to provide financial support for new hires. Make sure that in addition to this startup incentive, there are particular money that you can target it for these diverse hires to tell them, listen, we're very happy for you to be here. And we're not talking about a signing bonus, but in many ways it is. But always focus this in the area of faculty development. That's the way you can better present this type of aids. And also talk about shared funding. They say you want to promote a particular diversity initiative on campus, and for 2 or 3 faculty who will be involved in that, they will share the funding for that. And that's another opportunity to create for these new faculty to become more productive and better integrated in your institution. And finally, fundraising campaigns to support faculty diversity. This is an issue for which there are many foundations and many individuals that are interested in supporting, but what happens is many times the developing officers of these institutions don't realize that. And that's something that is really important for you to talk to the developing officers of your institution, to tell them, we need to raise funds for this, we need to raise funds for bringing more people, diverse people to campus. Now, you may have been doing all this and everything worked well and the person arrived, is satisfied and is happy, but you need to keep an effort, a continuous effort in making sure that you retain that faculty in the long run, because you have already made a lot of investment when it comes to money, effort, and even cultural changes in your institution by doing that. And for that, you need to develop a number of mentoring programs. Number 1, reinforce a respectful, positive work environment. That's very important that you take into consideration what needs to be done in order for people to feel happy and supported on campus. Because when campus have very few people of color, they tend to feel isolated, and that's never good. Institute a minority employee council as a support group. That is a group of people on campus who will get together and say, we want to meet with this new faculty. We're going to support them in networking, in advising them what kind of things they need to do in order to ensure that they get tenure and the like. So this minority employee council means that there is a group of people within campus to which this individual can go in case they have any need or any problem they would like to be solved. Organize a minority faculty welcoming reception. Again, you want this new faculty coming on campus to know each other, because most likely they are not in the same department. Most likely this is the first year they are on campus, and therefore this is a good thing for networking they can develop by doing these particular events on campus. Also organize an annual diverse women empowerment dinner to celebrate the professional accomplishments and personal successes. Again, they shouldn't feel relegated because of the situation on campus, and use this occasion to raise scholarship funds for diverse women students, and there are foundations, individuals who are willing to provide that kind of funds. Also create centers for diversity for educational experiences. For example, guest lectures, research, workshop on diversity issues. This could also attract diverse candidates applying for positions at your institution. I remember once I was surprised by the fact that in my College of Liberal Arts there were fewer women than males, which usually is the opposite in most campuses. And when I started to do some research about that and asking people what the problem was, it was this issue that they believe that only males who came from top institutions were, let's say, worth of their attention. And you can only learn about this by inviting people on campus, doing supporting some research, and providing some workshops on these particular issues. Retention studies. First of all, if a faculty leave campus, make sure that you conduct an exit interview. An exit interview that should be individualized in private to understand why they are leaving. So if a mistake was made, it can be corrected. Sometimes it's beyond your control because we have to maybe do with personal issues, a spouse who got a job elsewhere, that sort of things. But in many cases, there are real reasons why some people leave campus, and you need to understand that. Then use the outcomes of those interviews to revisit and revamp the recruitment and retention efforts, because that will give you specific examples of things that you need to do to improve the situation. Then compare how long minority employees stay at your institution as opposed to the majority counterparts. If you see a high rate of desertion of minorities, then something is wrong in your institution regarding those individuals. It seems that they are not being offered the opportunities nor the resources to be successful, and you need to change that. Identify job groups which experience the most difficult ability to retain minorities. Will allow you to focus efforts through these job groups in particular. I'm talking about specifically here departments. There are departments who are very welcoming of minorities or women, and there are others that are not. And you need to address those issues and talk to the faculty about how to change those practices that are hampering the diversification of your campus. And finally, leadership opportunities for diverse faculty. We mentioned earlier how the representation of minorities and women in academia is quite frankly negative, and they should improve. So one way to do that is to provide diverse faculty, particularly those who have already obtained tenure, opportunities to move up in the administration of the institution, and also serve as a kind of example that you can go wherever you want to go, regardless of the color of your skin or the nature of your gender. Create a leadership academy. That is basically a workshop offered to these individuals who might be interested in becoming from department chairs all the way to presidents, and how to get there and the kind of things they need to learn. Because one of the things that has surprised me the most about colleges and universities is how little the faculty really know about how their institution works. And that creates many times some kind of resentment, sometimes a paranoia, or imaginary ideas that have no basis in reality, that sort of things. So it is important to educate these individuals who want to get some position of leadership about the realities of how the institution works. Mentor individuals for an administrative position promotions. So not only provide this workshop, but also tell them, listen, this is an opportunity in the future. Maybe we need someone who is in charge of the particular area, might be giving some course releases to do this or that. That's another thing to elevate their possibilities and retain them on campus. Providing them with opportunities for assuming a leadership roles, basically meaning, listen, you are well qualified for this. This is pretty much an internal search that we're conducting, and I think that you should be the person for this position. So don't shy away from this particular situation. Also avoid overwhelming diversity faculty with service duties. As I mentioned earlier, if you make this faculty of color or women in areas where there's little representation of females to work extra because you need them in this kind of position, provide them with course releases or enhance their support for their scholarly work. Some will say, well, if you give me more money, I can do more research. That sort of thing. So think about that, because there has to be a compensation for this particular endeavor. And finally, I'm listed here list of some organizations. There are others, but these are probably the most prominent, that provide resources to enhance diversity and inclusion efforts. So you can go through this list, Google them, their website, and you will see how you will find a lot of support and advice that can improve the situation of diversity in your campus. And now comes the time to talk about the conclusions, the things that you keep in mind, and that will be the next session and the last session of this particular course. So stay tuned. Hello. Now this is the last session of this course on the issue of diversity in academia. I want to conclude with some general lessons that we need to keep in mind when addressing the issue of diversity in academia, both in terms of ethnicity as well as in terms of gender. And as you will see, there is more to that than just what I just mentioned. Let's begin with the concept of the diversity dividend. One of the things that you're going to find when trying to do these type of things is the question of why diversity? Why do we have to have diversity? And this seems to be an idle question, because everybody will say, yes, we agree there have to be more diversity, but actually you have to convince many people about the importance of diversity in academia. And sometimes you have to use the language that is employed outside academia to explain these things. Therefore, you need to deal with the skeptics about the importance of diversity. And in order to do that, you have to step aside from academia itself, avoid this tribalism to explain everything as we have to explain in our own environment in colleges and universities, and use a different language and a different set of facts that explain exactly why this is important. So let's go to the practical benefits of 2D diversity. What is 2D diversity? It's two-dimensional diversity. Basically, diversity is understood as what the kind of things we see, but there's much more for that. There are many more elements that we need to take into consideration to really understand what this is. There are three different parts of diversity that we need to remember, keep in mind when understanding what diversity is. The first one is what is visible: age, culture, gender, nationality, ethnicity, race, mental and physical status. This is the kind of things that we learn very easily by interviewing a candidate, by talking to him or her via Skype or some other means of communication, where we can actually see the person and understand what that person is all about. Sometimes we can also find a lot of information in places such as the internet, YouTube and the like, that give us also a better understanding what these kind of visible characteristics of the person are. The second one has to do with what's called visible or invisible, kind of a borderline there, on things that can be mentioned by the interviewee, not by us, that have to do with issues such as veteran status, religion, sexual orientation, the ability to communicate via language in general. So this is all the things that we are not actually allowed to ask about these things in an interview, but they can come across during the interview process because the person who is applying for the position basically can mention it in one way or another. And then there are other things that are pretty much invisible, that unless they actually come up from the interviewee in the interview process, we'll never learn about that. One is working style preferences. Basically, we're talking about here about whether the person is an early morning person, late evening person. You see this essentially in areas like natural sciences. Many of them are early birds, especially zoologists, for example. And in other areas like languages, English, and the like, they tend to be work late at night in their stuff. But this is something that is different for every individual in any way that may or may not come out during the interview process. The other is diversity of thought. Don't expect, and you shouldn't have everybody thinking exactly the same way, because that's not going to help to the intellectual diversity of the institution, the organization, or the department you are talking about. You need to come up with people who can have contrasting point of view, because in that way the whole environment will be richer, more diverse, and essentially much more powerful when it comes to attaining the goals. Family status is also something that can come up by the interviewee. We are not allowed to ask those questions in the interview process, but the interviewer may say something about, what about my spouse? Can he or she get a job in this community, and that sort of things? And you can learn about that, also about children that need school, information about schooling, that sort of things. Values and beliefs. There are different people with different set of values and beliefs. That doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's just that that's something that enriches diversity. Education, not just what is in the CV in terms of the degrees obtained or where you obtain that degree, but what is more important is what kind of other life experiences, which is also mentioned in this graph, the person has and how much that person has learned through those experiences. A person who's well traveled versus a person who has been pretty much confined to the same geographical location, that makes also a difference. Socioeconomic status sometimes comes up, sometimes it doesn't. And perspective in general is another thing that you need to take into consideration when it comes to creating a very diverse environment in 2 dimensions, not only what you see, but also what you cannot see. So let me give you now some tips that you can use with the skeptics about the importance of diversity in academia and why this is so important to create this for the benefit of the institution or the organization. The likelihood that companies in the top quartile for diversity financially outperforms those in the bottom quartile is this. With organizations that are gender diverse, they are 15% more likely to outperform, while in ethnically diverse organizations, they have a 35% more likely to outperform. And this is based on a study done by the McKinsey company, which does a lot of these type of studies regarding corporations and other kind of organizations. Also, the importance to keep in mind that diverse teams drive innovation. In a diverse team, these studies I mentioned earlier have shown that employees at organizations with 2D diversity are 75% more likely to have an innovative idea implemented. And why is that? It's because they are coming up with all these different experiences and perspectives that are different from most of the people, and that helps to create some kind of sense of innovation. That's why some of the basic phrases or ideas you need to keep in mind are such as like the ones on the top of this graph that say, I share credit for team success, I make it safe to risk new ideas, I give actionable feedback, take advice and implement feedback. I empower decision making by team members. All these create an environment in which diversity can really flourish when it comes to ideas and new point of view about how to do things. Also, diverse leaders unlock innovation. That's very important, because one of the things that we have seen in some of the specifics of the statistics for diversity in higher education is the lack of women and the lack of minorities in leadership roles. When you have people who have that kind of situation where leadership shows a tendency to create things more diverse and more innovative, you see that employees in organizations with a 2D diversity are, first of all, 70% more likely to see their organization capture new markets, 45% more likely to see the organization improve market share than employees in organizations without the two-dimensional diversity. Therefore, diversity is again good for the well-being of the organization. What are the key benefits of workplace diversity? Well, beginning from the top is easy troubleshooting. That means that when situations arise that are different from the normal, you will find more people prepared to deal with things that are out of the normal. And that's what troubleshooting is all about. The other thing is that they drive employees' engagement. In more diverse places, you can find how employees can relate to one another, learning from other people's experiences, seeing something that are not unidimensional but multidimensional. Also, it has been shown that it improves profits for the organization. They boost a reputation of the institution. I don't know if you have noticed that lately a lot of TV ads include mixed race couples, and the reason is because they have found that when you have an organization that looks like that, essentially you are transmitting a sense of being innovative, being modern, and being much more in the forefront of the field. Also, because of this, you can attract better talents, people who will feel that really you are innovative in the workplace, and also you can provide a variety of perspectives when it comes to make decisions, small or big. What kind of diversity efforts are we seeing now in the corporate world? This is the composite of logos of the many corporations that have been working very hard to look more and more diverse, and because of all the benefits I mentioned earlier. So I don't think anything wrong with academia trying to do the same thing, to look more and more diverse. Now, when it comes to diversity in tech companies, this is a kind of a scorecard that has been developed by watchdog organizations, where you can see how these companies in tech companies that are the ones that are driving a lot of the finances these days in this country, basically are doing in terms of these type of efforts to diversify themselves. Just to give you an example, for example, Facebook, that is third on the line there, now have developed policies that they will hire only law firms that are external law firms that are themselves diverse. So they are pushing the issue of diversity not only within the walls of the company, but also outside with the other corporations, other institutions they have to deal with. So again, this is a big push that is happening in an area that didn't used to be that diverse at the beginning, but now things are changing. Look, for example, Google that is doing a lot of things in that regard. Even the US government is doing a lot of work in this area in organizations that you wouldn't expect to be that interested in that. One is the National Security Agency, and the other is the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. These two organizations actually have been doing a lot of work in trying to make their staff much more diverse. And the reason for that is not just the kind of, looking nice stuff about being diverse and the like. No, it's because they understand that we live in a very diverse world in terms of races and religions and genders and perspectives and views, you name it. And therefore they need also people who are very diverse to better understand what's going on in the world for the benefit of the United States. Other thing that you need to keep in mind is all the political considerations of not being very diverse. This picture that you see here won the Pulitzer Prize for news photography in 1970. This is a group of black students at Cornell University, as you can see, well armed with bandoliers and the like, basically demanding to hire more faculty of color. In this time where we live in a very divisive society, where there is a lot of issues regarding race and a lot of confrontation in that area, I think we better also show that we really care about the issue of diversity to avoid this type of political confrontations that do not benefit anybody. And let me finish now with a summary of a paper that was published, written by Robert Putnam of Harvard University, called A Pluribus Unum, Diversity and Community in the 21st Century, that was part of the 2006 Jonathan Skype Prize lecture. In this excerpt from the conclusions of this work, Dr. Putnam said, in ethically diverse neighborhoods, trust, even of one's own race, is lower. Altruism and community cooperation are rarer, and friends are fewer. This sounds counterintuitive to what we may think, but this is the reality that happens out there. What I mean to say with this is take a look always on the nature of human nature. You may feel sometimes, I would say, disconcerted or upset even, because you see that some people don't react to the issue of diversity the way they should be doing. And the reason is very simple. It is part of human nature. And to modify human nature takes a lot of time and effort. But still, I think the goal is worthwhile to achieve. In conclusion, diversity makes organizations better, and that includes, of course, colleges and universities. Academia is a bad offender when it comes to equality. So despite all the talk that is around the political correctness and everything else, the fact of the matter is we are doing a terrible job in general when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And please beware of unconscious bias and tribalism. It is there, and we have to be very careful and keep these things always in the back of our minds to avoid the pitfalls that these situations create for all of us. In terms of resources, I want to tell you that there is a paper that I published that discuss all these particular issues with more expanded version of the things that you can do, which this one was approved by the Council of Colleges and Arts and Sciences, also the International Council of Fine Arts, Deans. And this paper is freely available to you through this website and this particular link. You can go there and find this paper that is open to anybody. And also, if you want to take a look of broader issues that have to do with diversity and other aspects of institutional failures in higher education, you can also get the book that my colleague John Pratt and myself wrote about this, which is available through Amazon. Well, saying that, I want to say goodbye. Here you have my contact information in case if you have any questions or any things that you want to contact with me, and I will be more than happy to provide advice if I can. So thank you very much for attending this course. I hope it has been informative and useful for you, and stay tuned for other courses. Bye-bye.